Hey guys, tonight we journey to a place where the air constantly smells like scorched leather, your hands are never not dirty, and you're one hammer swing away from developing permanent hearing loss. Welcome to the life of a medieval blacksmith. The year is somewhere in the late 1300s. You're standing in a cramped, timber-framed hut with a roof that somehow leaks and traps smoke at the same time. You've been up since before the birds, and the only warmth comes from the forge you're about to spark into a tiny sun. Your whole life revolves around metal, shaping it, taming it, occasionally being burned by it. You probably won't survive this century, let alone this profession. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere around the world, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The floor under your bare feet is already gritty with soot. You shove the wooden door open and blink as dawn creeps in. You're not surprised to see frost on the cart outside or to hear the rooster giving its daily pre-breakfast meltdown. You have no time for roosters. You've got metal to burn. Your forge is small but dense. Every inch matters. A warped anvil sits proudly in the middle, flanked by buckets full of cloudy water and iron rods that could double as poorly made spears. Tongs lean in the corner like sleeping drunks. The bellows, giant lungs made of animal hide, hang suspended above the coals, ready to wheeze and breathe life into the embers. You toss in some charcoal and strike flint until a spark catches. The coals begin to crackle, slowly, then hungrily. You pump the bellows gently at first, like coaxing a baby dragon awake. The flames leap, dancing orange and blue. Your day has begun, and it's going to suck. Blacksmithing in the Middle Ages isn't the heroic, shirtless, Thor-style fantasy people imagine. It's muscle-cramping, eye-watering, back-breaking drudgery. Your hands are already calloused, but they'll crack worse in winter. You've got a burn on your left wrist that looks suspiciously like Italy, and your right elbow sounds like someone chewing gravel. You haven't had a bath in a week, but neither has anyone else, so you're blending in nicely. Today's orders include 2 iron hinges, 3 dozen nails, a plowshare for Farmer Oswin, who will absolutely haggle like his oxen are starving, and, oh yes, yet another horseshoe. It always comes back to horseshoes. You start with nails. They're dull work, but you can shape one in under a minute now. Cut, heat, hammer, cool, repeat. They pile up like blackened teeth. Nails, for some reason, are considered an essential miracle of village life, even though half the villagers would rather trade in gossip than pay you. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths were considered respected craftsmen or just glorified grunts. Some say your role put you near the top of the peasant food chain. Others argue you were only respected until someone's scythe broke mid-harvest, and then it was your head on the metaphorical chopping block. Either way, you rarely left the forge, and when you did, it was usually to deliver something heavy or chase down someone who hadn't paid you. As the forge glows hotter, the entire hut becomes an oven. You wipe sweat from your brow with your sleeve and immediately regret it. Your sleeve is mostly iron dust and soot. Now you got a black streak across your forehead that will make you look like a medieval raccoon until bath day, which is next month. The rhythm of your work is soothing if you don't think too hard. The steady hiss of hot metal plunging into water, the clang of hammer against anvil ringing like a church bell for only your ears, the occasional swear when you drop a rod on your foot. Did we mention the shoes? You're not wearing any. At best, you got leather soles tied on with string, and since arch support hasn't been invented yet, your arches have collapsed in protest. By late morning, your shoulders ache, your thumb is numb, and your breakfast, 2 pieces of rye bread and a hunk of onion, has worn off. A neighbor drops by to request a padlock for his grain store, and you try not to roll your eyes. A padlock? In this economy? But you nod, add it to the mental list, and offer him a half smile that says, "Sure, I'll make it. But if you pay me in turnips again, I'll scream." Outside, the village is alive with clatter and chatter. Children chase chickens. A cart rolls by carrying what smells like fermented cabbage, and someone is loudly arguing about a goat. Inside your forge, though, it's just you and the fire never stops asking for more. As you bend over the flames, face glowing red in the reflected heat, you wonder, briefly, why no one ever talks about blacksmith knees. Your knees are screaming, and there's no one to complain to, except the tongs. You reach for a red-hot rod with your oldest pair. They slip. The rod tumbles toward your foot. By instinct, you jump back. It lands harmlessly on the floor, but your heart keeps thudding like a drum solo. Just another reminder that your job wants to kill you, slowly, artistically. Still, you sigh, smile faintly, and pick up the rod again. Time to start over, because this hinge won't hinge itself. Before the rooster even thinks about crowing, you're already halfway through your morning ritual, which mostly consists of not dying from cold or fire. You wake in a loft above the forge, curled beneath a blanket that's only marginally warmer than the floor. Your straw mattress pokes your back in 10 different places. There's a mouse somewhere in the corner chewing a bootlace like it owes him money. And your breath is visible in the air because medieval insulation is, let's call it, aspirational. The sun hasn't risen, but you have. Because if the forge isn't burning before dawn, the village will start knocking before you've had time to remember your name. You rub your eyes with hands that are somehow gritty, even though they've been nowhere near dirt since you fell asleep. That's the magic of forge dust. It migrates. You trudge down the creaky ladder, every step a new groan from your knees. You're sore from yesterday, but then again, you're always sore. It's your default setting now. The forge is dark and cold. You kneel to stir the leftover ash, hoping for a live ember. But no, it's all gone out, which means you'll need to start the fire from scratch. Again, you reach for the flint and steel, which have gotten smoother from daily use. A few sparks, a gentle puff of breath, and finally, the fire takes. It's like convincing a grumpy cat to sit on your lap. Not impossible, just humbling. As the flame grows, it lights up the familiar clutter. Iron scraps, tools in various states of wear, and a jar of something your apprentice swears is for cleaning wounds, though it smells suspiciously like ale and garlic. You'll try anything once, but last time it gave you a rash shaped like a bishop. Breakfast? That's a maybe. If you're lucky, someone brought over hard cheese or barley cakes yesterday. Otherwise, it's a stale crust and water. Hydration being less about health and more about not fainting into the forge. You sit on the anvil, chewing like a medieval goat, and listen to the world begin. A dog barks in the distance. Hooves clomp past the hut. Somewhere a baby cries and is promptly ignored. The rhythms of a town waking up, none of them as brutal as yours. You stretch your arms overhead, which produces more crunches than a handful of dried beans. Your back sounds like it's narrating its own story, possibly a tragedy. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths were part of the middle class before the concept even existed. Some claim you had upward mobility. Your skills were essential. Your customers came from all walks of life. Others argue you were little more than an overworked servant, constantly flirting with bankruptcy, back problems, and third-degree burns. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. You were respected, but not too respected. Important, but not rich. Indispensable, but replaceable. A real confidence booster, that one. You throw more charcoal into the hearth and start the bellows. The flames rise. Time to prep for the day's orders and maybe sneak in a personal project or two, if you can keep your neighbors from wandering in with urgent requests that absolutely could have waited. A woman knocks softly and peers in. She's holding the broken metal handle of a chamber pot and says her husband broke it in a moment of urgency. You try not to imagine how. You just nod and take it, adding it to the growing pile of bizarre repairs you'll pretend not to think too hard about. Then comes the village elder's boy, who's lost yet another buckle from his saddle strap. "Must have fallen off when I was jumping that log," he says proudly, despite the fact he was likely trotting gently through a turnip field. You smile thinly, because sarcasm doesn't sharpen metal. Back to the forge. You start heating iron bars, judging their temperature not by any fancy gauge, but by the color of their glow. Dull red, cherry red, orange, yellow, white. You don't need thermometers when your eyes and skin do the job, for better or worse. As you hammer the first piece, the familiar rhythm begins. Lift, strike, turn, strike again. Sparks fly. You squint instinctively. It's like blacksmith ballet, but with less grace and more permanent hearing loss. And always your mind drifts, not because you're bored, though you kind of are, but because repetition opens a window. You think about what's for supper, whether it'll rain, and if the mouse upstairs will eat your other boot. You wonder if the blister on your thumb is turning into something biblical. Maybe not leprosy, but perhaps its milder cousin, burn hand rot. You also wonder if your apprentice will show up today. You've had 3 this year. 1 quit, 1 ran off to join a monastery. He claimed he felt called, but mostly just hated the smell. And 1 simply vanished, though you heard rumors he joined a traveling puppet show. Honestly, good for him. Apprenticeship for a blacksmith isn't glamorous. It's hauling coal, fetching water, stoking fires, and grinding tools until your knuckles scream. You were an apprentice once, and you still have the wrist scar to prove it. The bell in the village square tolls, faint and lopsided, like it's just as tired as you are. That's your cue, mid-morning. Time to reheat the first batch and start shaping nails. Again, you glance at the bucket of half-finished pieces and sigh. They won't hammer themselves, and you can't eat until they're done. Not that there's much food waiting. A neighbor swings by with gossip. Apparently, the baker is being fined for shortchanging flour again. You nod absently while adjusting your tongs, thinking about How unfair it is that his mistakes get him fined, but your mistakes get someone's gate falling off its hinges. Back to work. You swing the hammer. Sparks arc through the smoky air. Your arms ache already, but the fire's still hot, the coal's still hungry, and the day has barely begun. You don't remember the first time you got burned. It's just part of the territory now. Your skin is a map of minor betrayals, blistered thumbs, singed arm hair, the permanent tan of someone who sunbathes exclusively in front of hellfire. You know what a good burn smells like. You also know what a bad burn smells like. And unfortunately, that one's familiar too. The forge isn't just a workplace, it's a hazard zone with a roof. You operate in a blur of glowing metal, unpredictable sparks, and tools so heavy they might qualify as medieval workout equipment. It's not a matter of if something will go wrong, it's a matter of when. This morning, for example, you drop a glowing horseshoe. It lands on the floor inches from your foot, close enough to feel the heat radiate through your thin soles. You swear, under your breath of course, because old Agnes from the next hut says cursing invites demons. And honestly, your week doesn't need that. Your tongs, which you repaired last week with a makeshift rivet, decide today is the day to unrivet. Mid-lift, the iron bar slips and clatters to the ground. You flinch instinctively. That bar's still white-hot, singing a soft hiss as it cools where it landed. You stare at it thinking, someday one of these will hit me in the teeth. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths understood the long-term risks of exposure to smoke and metal fumes. Some say they did. There are records of Smith's lung and vague warnings about choking vapors. Others claim no one really made the connection between chronic coughing and daily inhalation of poison air. Either way, you know one thing. You cough more now than you did 5 years ago, and it's not the kind of cough that goes away. You take a step back to stretch your back and immediately trip over a pile of scrap iron you definitely meant to move 3 days ago. Your shin connects with a jagged edge. The pain is sharp, and you hop once, curse again, sorry Agnes, and mutter a note to self to finally sort the scrap pile. Of course you won't. You'll forget until the next time. The forge is a circus of minor injuries. Burns are the obvious one, but then there are the less glamorous issues. Splinters from cracked tool handles, tiny shards of flying slag that lodge in your clothing, or worse, your eye. Bruised fingers from hammer strikes that miss their target. Every blacksmith develops a flinch. It's not cowardice. It's just muscle memory. And then there's the heat. By midday, the forge feels like a brick oven that's also judging you. You're sweating so much it's dripping from your nose and sizzling in the coals. Your shirt is stuck to your back, and your hair feels like it's been gently boiled. The bellows are pumping like an asthmatic beast, wheezing with every push, but the fire is still not hot enough for the larger pieces. You try to catch a breeze at the door, but the air outside is thick and unmoving. A chicken stares at you from the yard, unimpressed. You stare back, briefly jealous. At least the chicken isn't on fire. You sit for a moment, wiping your face with a rag that's more soot than cloth. Your knees creak. Your elbow makes a popping noise you choose to ignore. You sip water from a tin cup, the contents lukewarm and slightly metallic as always. You wonder if other trades have it this rough. Probably, but at least the cobbler isn't risking second-degree burns making sandals. Still, there's a weird pride to it. You're part of a lineage, Blacksmiths have existed for centuries, some say millennia. You're not just hitting metal. You're shaping the tools that shape the world. Plows, swords, nails, hinges, horseshoes. Your work keeps the village from falling apart at the seams. Of course, you're also slowly turning into a human raisin. So, trade-offs. Someone arrives with a bent axe blade. You agree to reforge it, and as you examine the damage, you notice a hairline fracture. Could be poor iron, or maybe a curse, depending on who you ask. You toss it in the scrap pile and start anew. You heat a fresh bar. You hammer. The sound fills the forge. Clang, clang, hiss. You lose yourself in the rhythm. It's oddly soothing if you ignore the blisters and existential dread, and then your hammer handle cracks. It's a clean break, years of use catching up at once. You stare at the two pieces in your hands and let out a long sigh. You'll need to shape a new one tonight. Again. The third this year. They don't make wood like they used to. You switch to your backup hammer, which feels like using a spoon to pound fence posts, but it works. Mostly, another hour passes, and your apprentice, bless his erratic sense of timing, wanders in with his shirt inside out and soot already on his nose. You open your mouth to say something, then close it. You just point him toward the water bucket and nod. He grins sheepishly and gets to work cleaning the tools you already cleaned. You can hear a commotion outside. Someone's cart has broken an axle. You'll probably be asked to fix it later for the low, low price of my eternal gratitude and possibly a turnip. You sigh again and stand. Another piece of hot iron is ready. You grip the tongs, adjust your stance, and swing the hammer. The fire crackles. The metal sings. You've got burns on burns, scars like tree rings, and fingers that can no longer straighten all the way. But you're still here, still working, still sweating, because the forge waits for no one. You know what the worst part is? You're starving. It's not a dramatic kind of hunger, not famine-level desperation, just that quiet, persistent, medieval gnawing in your belly that never quite goes away. Blacksmithing burns through calories like fire through dry thatch, and your diet is modest. Generous on bread, stingy on meat, and blessedly indifferent to flavor. This morning's meal, a crust of rye and a slice of onion, did its best, but that was hours ago. Now, as the forge blazes and your arms ache, with each swing of the hammer, you can practically hear your stomach composing a folk song of protest. You glance longingly at the small bundle you tucked behind the bellows. Inside, a piece of hard cheese, a shriveled apple, and a boiled egg that might be from yesterday. You tell yourself you'll wait until noon to eat it, then immediately fail and take a bite of the cheese. It's dry, like chewing a brick, but it's food. Historians still argue whether medieval craftsmen were better fed than field laborers. On one hand, you're not out plowing fields or carrying sacks of barley. On the other, your work is constant, hot, and brutally physical. Plus, you don't grow your own food. You rely on the market, barter, or the random kindness of bakers with surplus buns. Today's meal was courtesy of the potter's wife, who traded it for 4 iron hooks and a vague promise to sharpen her husband's trowel sometime this month. You suspect that's a net loss, but at least the egg wasn't raw this time. Lunch, if you can call it that, barely touches the sides, but it's enough to keep the hammer swinging, and that's what matters. Back to work. You've got a plowshare to shape, and this one's big. Probably for Farmer Aldrich. who always smells faintly of cow and tells the same story about the time lightning struck the field and made the wheat glow. You're still not sure if that actually happened or if he just fell asleep in the sun again. You heat the iron slowly, rolling your shoulders while you wait. The warmth feels good for a moment until the fire roars too high and the heat blasts your face like an angry bread oven. You curse under your breath again. Sorry, Agnes. With the metal glowing yellow, you start hammering. Each strike feels heavier than the last. Your arms aren't just tired, they're leaden, trembling slightly with each movement. You think about pacing yourself, but laugh a little inside. Who has time for that? You're halfway through shaping the curve when a spark flies off the edge and lands directly on your upper arm. You yelp, more out of surprise than pain. You slap it away, but there's a tiny black mark already forming on your tunic. You sniff. Yup, wool, slightly singed. Add it to the collection. There's an open debate about whether blacksmiths wore special protective clothing. Some say padded aprons and leather sleeves were common. Others suggest most smiths worked in whatever they had, layering old tunics with a shrug that said, "Hope this doesn't catch fire." You lean toward the latter theory, mostly because you've seen your neighbor Ulrich forge bare-armed in a sleeveless sackcloth shirt. He says it keeps him cool. He also has scars like a tiger, so you're not sure that's a win. You stop to stretch again, joints popping like twigs. Your fingers are tingling, a sign you're either gripping the hammer too tight or possibly developing nerve damage. Who can say? You take a sip from your water bucket, gag slightly, and remember you meant to clean it last week. Too late now. Iron-flavored hydration it is. There's movement at the door. Your apprentice returns, late again, with a piece of flatbread he swears is fresh. You raise an eyebrow. It bends like leather. You thank him anyway and put it aside for emergency chewing. He gets to work fanning the forge, eyes half-lidded, clearly bored. You don't blame him. His job is to stoke fires, sweep ash, and occasionally hand you the wrong tool at the worst possible moment, like now. You ask for the narrow tongs. He hands you the poker. You stare at him. He stares back, unbothered. You take the poker, quietly. He's new. You'll break him in, or he'll flee to the monastery like the last one. You finish the plowshare and set it to cool. The hiss of red-hot iron and water is one of your favorite sounds, equal part satisfaction and minor threat. You smile faintly and wipe your brow again. Someone outside is yelling. You hear the words sheep and fence and something about that blasted hole. You wait for the knock. Sure enough, moments later, a boy appears. His father needs 2 new hinges for the pasture gate. Today, if possible, he says, with the desperation of someone whose sheep are currently exploring unauthorized real estate. You nod. Of course you nod. You always nod. That's the blacksmith's curse, saying yes to everyone because if you don't, they'll just go to the other guy in the next village and then complain when his hinges bend like boiled noodles. You start the new batch. More heating, more hammering, more smoke, more hunger despite the cheese. The forge, loyal as always, roars around you. You're damp with sweat, speckled with ash, and wondering if you're going to lose that toenail that turned black last week. Probably. But the plowshare is done. The new hinges are cooling. You're still upright. And that's enough for today's halfway mark. Some people get excited about new shoes. You? You get excited about new tongs. You run your fingers over the bent iron handles of your current pair, once faithful, now rebellious. They've lost their grip, literally, and you're one dropped billet away from a toe-related tragedy. So today, in the rare and sacred pocket of unscheduled time, you're making a new set. The forge is still hot. Of course it is. It's always hot. And you're using scrap iron that's only slightly rusted. You heat the first rod until it glows like a sunset and start shaping the jaws. The rhythm is hypnotic. Hammer. Rotate. Strike. Pause. Adjust. Your apprentice watches, wide-eyed, like you're summoning lightning. "How do you know when it's ready?" he asks, because he hasn't yet developed the sixth sense all blacksmiths need. Fire intuition. You shrug. "When it stops fighting you," you say. A vague answer, but not untrue. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths had formal training or mostly learned by doing. Guild records suggest both. In larger towns, formal apprenticeships were codified, with years of service and strict milestones. But out here, in your smoke-stained corner of the countryside, you learn by trial, error, and occasional fire-related regret. If you still have both eyebrows, you're ahead of schedule. You show the apprentice how to twist the handle stock. He fumbles it, nearly drops the metal into the slack tub, and jumps back like it bit him. You nod approvingly. That's how you know it's hot enough. He doesn't laugh. That's fine. You do your own comedy. Tongs finished. You admire your handiwork for exactly 4 seconds before setting them aside. You'll test them on the next project, which, according to your memory and the scrap of parchment nailed to the wall, is either a hinge for the miller's barn or a set of candle holders for the priest. Either way, the tongs will get their trial by fire. You glance at your other tools. The hammers, 4 of them in various states of decay, sit on the rack like grumpy old uncles. The largest one, Old Thumper, weighs nearly as much as your apprentice. You only use it for armor work, or when you're trying to send a message to particularly stubborn metal. It's chipped on one side and gives your wrist a twinge every time you use it. You love it anyway. The smaller hammers are nimbler, but prone to breaking. You've replaced 2 this year alone. Hammer handles, surprisingly, aren't standardized. Some are ash wood, others oak. One's probably just a broomstick you shaved down in a hurry. It works. Mostly. Then there's your chisels, blunt, sharp, curved, and the punches for holes and rivets. Each one tells a story. This one bent fixing a knight's helmet after a jousting accident. That one snapped making a bracket for a chicken coop. You're still not sure how. The tiny punch with the wonky edge, you use that one for charms and little personal trinkets. Not everything you make has to be practical. Sometimes people just want a metal rabbit for luck. The bellows wheeze beside you. You check the leather straps and wooden paddles they're holding up for now. You repaired them last week with scrap leather and a few well-placed prayers. No one teaches you how to fix bellows. You just do it, or you stop having a fire. And if you stop having a fire, you stop having an income. And then the baker starts giving you that look. You step back and eye the room. The forge is chaos, but it's your chaos. Tools everywhere, ash on everything. Anvil surrounded by a permanent halo of tiny metal shards and cracked slag. It's the kind of place OSHA would have nightmares about, if OSHA existed in the 14th century, which it doesn't. Lucky you. Your apprentice starts sweeping with a bundle of reeds tied to a stick. The soot lifts in lazy clouds and settles exactly where it started. You say nothing. The effort counts. You sit on your stool, and wrap a rag around your hand. A blister's forming where the hammer grip wore through your glove. You grimace, then smile slightly. You're collecting them like some people collect coins. You remember the time you tried to forge a hammer from scratch. Took you 3 days, and the head cracked the first time you used it. You still have it somewhere. Half a tool, half a reminder not to rush your tempering. Every tool you've made since has been better, but none have survived without their own quirks. That's the thing with blacksmithing. Nothing is ever perfect. A hinge may hang slightly off-center. A horseshoe might need reshaping. A latch will squeak no matter how many times you oil it. You make peace with imperfection, or you go mad. There's a superstition whispered among blacksmiths that your tools reflect your soul. A bent chisel. You got unresolved grudges. A cracked hammer. You're working too hard. You laugh it off, of course. But still, you check your favorite tongs before bed each night, just to be sure. It's nearing evening, but you've got one more job in you. A scythe blade, dulled from summer wheat and carelessly stored near the pig pen. The edge is chipped but salvageable. You heat it slowly, hammer it gently, quenching at intervals. Your apprentice watches, entranced. You talk to the metal, he says. You pause. Maybe you do. You never thought about it, but you do mutter under your breath while you work. Not prayers, just nonsense. Names for the pieces. A bit of rhythm, a touch of charm. You say nothing, just smile and hammer once more. The apprentice is gone now, dispatched home with soot-stained hands and the stunned expression of someone who didn't know metal could be that heavy. You watch him shuffle off into the twilight, cradling his wrist like he's just survived a duel. Honestly, he probably has. The anvil always wins. You stay, of course. The day isn't done. It never really is. You rake the coals into a mound, stacking fresh charcoal on top. The forge grumbles in appreciation. The glow returns slowly, blooming like fire-lit flowers. Another job waits, a set of gate hinges for the tanner's barn. You sigh. The tanner. His requests always smell like regret. You grab the iron stock and measure your cuts. The metal is old and uneven, probably salvaged from a broken plow or a door someone kicked in during a wedding. That's the thing about working in a village. Everything gets recycled. Not because of eco-consciousness, but because new iron is expensive and nobody wants to pay for it, unless a cow is actively escaping. You heat the bars slowly, watching for that soft orange glow that says, now. And then you hammer. The blows echo across the forge, into the night, rhythmic, hypnotic, like the heartbeat of an angry god. Your neighbors don't complain. They're used to it. Plus, you fix their tools. You swing, shape, and turn. Sparks fly up like tiny meteors, painting golden trails in the smoke-thick air. You don't even flinch anymore when they land on your sleeves. Half your shirts have scorch holes. You call it Smith's lace. And then, mid-swing, your elbow twinges. It's not sharp, not yet. Just a warning shot. A little whisper from your joint saying, you're not as young as you think. You pause, stretch it out, rotate the arm. The pain lingers, but doesn't deepen. You press on. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths had any concept of chronic pain or repetitive strain injury. Probably not in those words, but they definitely knew what it meant to wake up sore, stay sore, and go to bed more sore. Remedies included herbal poultices, bone-setting advice from people with zero credentials, or just walking it off. You lean against the anvil for a moment, breathing in the mingled scent of hot iron, smoke, sweat, and something oddly like roasted onions. You hope that's outside. And you think about your body, the only tool more important than your hammer. Your right hand, for instance, has a knuckle that's permanently swollen. Your shoulders sit unevenly now, one slightly higher than the other, thanks to years of swinging a heavy hammer on the same side. Your lower back, a patchwork of stiffness and mystery aches. And you've developed this interesting ability to predict the weather based on your knees. Still, you keep working. You shape the first hinge and dunk it in the quench bucket. Steam hisses upward in a ghostly cloud. It clings to your eyelashes and leaves your cheeks damp. You wipe your face with your sleeve and immediately regret it. Another smudge of ash across already filthy skin. Ah, well, you'll blend in with the livestock tomorrow. Your tools complain more now than they used to. The chisel you're using to score the hinge plate is slightly dull, which means you're applying twice the pressure. Your fingers go numb briefly, then tingle back to life. You think about taking a day off. Not today, obviously. Maybe not this week, but someday. You imagine sleeping in until the sun is high, eating something not wrapped in cloth or scraped from a wheel, and maybe, just maybe, spending an afternoon without fire in your face. Of course, you know better. Days off are rare. The village needs you. When a plow breaks, who fixes it? You. When a gate won't latch, who repairs the hinge? You. When someone wants a decorative horseshoe because they're superstitious about fertility rituals, you guessed it, you. You're the village's necessary beast of burden, useful, sturdy, occasionally loud. But you're not just working for them. You're working for you because there's pride in this. The gate holds because of your hinge. The armor shines because of your polish. The bell tower rings because your tools made it so. You hear the outer door creak. A customer, maybe? No, just the wind. You check your stockpile anyway, a few rods left, enough for a couple of nails or a latch, maybe tomorrow. You sit for a moment on your low stool. Your hips protest. Your neck crackles when you turn it. You know that crackle. You've named it Gerald. You flex your fingers. They don't straighten all the way anymore. There's a bump on your middle knuckle that wasn't there last year. Probably arthritis. Or, as your neighbor puts it, the cold in your bones. He offers you nettle tea for it sometimes. You drink it out of politeness, not belief. And still, you hammer, because this is your place. The forge is messy and dangerous and smells like a burnt dragon, but it's yours. You've built every shelf, shaped every tool, patched every roof leak. Poorly, but still, a particularly large spark jumps and lands on your forearm. You mutter a soft curse and brush it off. It leaves a red mark. You add it to the growing constellation of tiny personal star maps scattered across your skin. You finish the second hinge, quench it, and set it next to its partner. Tomorrow the tanner will come and pick them up and probably complain about the price. You'll smile, nod, and throw in a handful of nails just to get him to leave faster. You look at your hands. So many blisters. Some of them layered like geologic strata. Dirt under the nails. Tiny cuts from wire. A new blood blister forming near the base of your thumb. You should wrap it. You won't. You stretch again, bones clunking like a dropped tool chest, and begin to bank the fire. It's late, but not too late. just enough time to polish that new set of tongs. You wake up the next morning and immediately wish you hadn't. Your hands feel like they've been squeezed in a vise overnight. Your spine is a Jenga tower missing 3 crucial pieces. And there's a tender patch on your left shoulder that throbs with every breath. You blink crust from your eyes, stretch your legs, and hear a pop so loud it scares a nearby pigeon off the roof. The forge waits, of course, like it always does. You hobble down the ladder, every joint protesting like it's auditioning for a tragic ballad. You reach for a cup of yesterday's water, swish it around to check for floating soot, then sip it anyway. Breakfast is a wedge of something bread-like and a chunk of salted radish. You don't question it. You've eaten worse. Once, during a supply shortage, you were 70% sure you gnawed on boiled shoe leather. It had a certain chew. Outside, the morning is brisk. The sun peers sleepily over the rooftops. You hear the baker's dog barking and someone shouting about lost goats again. Ah, routine. You pull open the forge door and the wave of cold ash scent hits you. Not unpleasant, just ever-present. Your lungs are used to it now, probably too used to it. You stir the coals, pump the bellows, and feel the fire begin to breathe again. It crackles to life like a grumpy old man. You nod. That's about how you feel too. Today's work: finishing a set of buckles, mending a cracked cooking pot, sharpening shears, and, lucky you, fixing a horseshoe. Again. Let's talk about horseshoes. Everyone thinks they're simple, bent metal, nailed to hooves. But making a proper one, that's a mix of geometry, patience, and sheer stubborn will. Horseshoeing is the blacksmith's least glamorous job and also one of the most common. You select a flat iron strip, heat it to a glowing orange, and begin the bends. You've done this hundreds of times, but the metal always tries to surprise you, warping here, thinning there, just to keep you humble. You hold it against a wooden form carved to mimic a horse's hoof. The curve is wrong. Back into the fire, heat, hammer, cool again, repeat until the metal obeys. Historians still argue whether medieval horseshoeing was more an art or a science. Some blacksmiths specialized in farriery, treating hoof problems and custom-fitting shoes. Others, like you, just try to keep the local horses from limping into your workshop like hungover barmaids. You're not a vet, but you've seen more horse hooves than you care to count, and you've developed opinions. Strong ones. For instance, hooves are disgusting. They smell bad, shed unpredictably, and sometimes arrive attached to a horse that would rather kick you into next Tuesday. One particularly memorable gelding once sneezed directly into your face while you were mid-nail. That was the day you nearly quit. You haven't, though. You just wear a hat now. You set the finished shoe on the bench and start shaping nails. Shoeing nails are longer, flatter, more brutal than normal ones. Forging them requires precision. You miss once and ruin the taper, miss twice, and you stab yourself again. And then there's fitting. Sometimes the owner brings the horse to you. More often, you trudge out to their barn with a bag of tools, bending over in muddy straw, while the horse shifts nervously and the farmer tries to help by talking loudly to it, as if that's ever worked. You've learned to work fast. Quick nail, tap, tap, twist, repeat. If you're lucky, the horse holds still. If you're not, you get a hoof to the shin. You've lost count of how many times you've limped home, cursing noble beasts. You glance down at your own boots, sturdy leather, cracked, toe curled slightly from years of impact. You made them yourself, of course. with enough reinforcement to survive minor equine rage. You wiggle your toes, still attached. So far, so good. Back in the forge, you move on to the cracked pot. It's copper, soft, stubborn, and liable to warp under heat. You patch it with a riveted iron strip, not elegant, but functional. And that's your signature move. Then it's on to the shears. They're dull, rusted, and probably older than you. You sharpen the edges on your grindstone, which squeals in protest. A few sparks dance off the wheel and kiss your sleeve. You ignore them. You've been burned so often, it barely registers. At this point, it's like catching rain, annoying, but not worth mentioning unless it gets dramatic. Speaking of dramatic, your thumb is now throbbing. That blister from yesterday, it popped. You grimace and wrap it with a strip of linen from your toolbox. No time to clean it properly. Maybe later. Maybe never. You sit on your stool for a moment, watching the fire sway in its stone cradle. You realize you've been breathing shallowly, holding tension in your shoulders. You try to exhale fully, stretch your neck, realign something that's been off since spring. It doesn't work. Your spine clicks like a latch being forced. You reach for your water cup again. It's warm now, has a bit of forge grit floating in it. You drink it anyway. Grit builds character. The sun is climbing. The bell in the square rings. Noon. You haven't stopped since dawn. You finally grab that sad half loaf of bread and a wrinkled fig someone left on your bench yesterday. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, like someone who knows this is all the sustenance he's getting today, unless someone shows up with a surprise turnip. You lean back, shoulders pressed to the forge wall, bread still in hand, and sigh. Half the day down, half to go, and still more horseshoes, always more horseshoes. If you've ever wondered what passes for a holiday when you're a medieval blacksmith, the answer is you don't get holidays. You get pauses. A holiday technically might mean a church feast day. In theory, you're not supposed to work. In practice, the tanner's cart axle broke on St. Eligius Day last year, and guess who had to fix it before the pigs got loose? That's right. You, covered in axle grease, muttering apologies to the patron saint of metalworkers while tightening bolts with a spanner that predates reliable calendars. But today is what passes for a break, a heat wave. The forge is unbearable. The coals fight you, burning too hot, too fast. Your tools are too hot to hold. Even the bellows seem exhausted, wheezing half-heartedly like an old dog trying to nap. The walls of your hut radiate heat. Your clothes cling like wet parchment. You step outside, hoping for a breeze, and are immediately slapped in the face by air that feels like dragon breath. You squint at the sky. The sun is practically screaming. So, you do something radical. You take a break. You find a shady spot under the eaves, plop down on an upturned bucket, and let yourself go momentarily limp. The sweat continues. You don't fight it. You simply melt. The street is eerily quiet. The livestock are hiding. The baker's closed. Even the chickens are lying low, wings spread like feathered sunbathers. You consider lying down in the trough, but you remember what happened last time. Someone tossed a bucket of rinse water on you, thinking you were a lump of laundry. You lean your head back against the timber wall and close your eyes for a moment. A very small breeze finally shows up, tepid and faint, like someone whispering air from a distance. You savor it anyway. Historians still argue whether medieval craftsmen worked through all seasons or took deliberate time off during extreme weather? The answer probably depended on location and desperation. In wealthy towns with strong guilds, some smiths might have had enforced rest. In rural hamlets like yours, though, rest usually meant illness, injury, or weather so punishing that even the village priest gave up and lay in the shade. You take the opportunity to check your hands. The blister is weeping again. You pick at the edge, decide that's a bad idea, then cover it with a square of waxed linen. You're not sure it's helping, but it makes you feel slightly more in control of your own biology. You sip from your water cup, lukewarm again, has a hint of charcoal. You swirl it around and imagine you're drinking something exotic. Wine, maybe, or mountain stream water. You're good at pretending. Comes with the job. Eventually, someone finds you. A boy, maybe 10 years old, barefoot and dust-caked, approaches with the solemn air of someone delivering royal news. "My mum says the cooking spit broke," he says. "She needs it mended before the goose roasts." You look at him, you look at the sun, you look at the sweat soaking through your shirt. Then you look at the boy again. "Tell her it'll be fixed in an hour," you say. You rise slowly, like dough that's lost its will to rise. Back inside the forge, the air is heavier than before. The fire has half died. You coax it back with the bellows, each pump more exhausting than the last. The sweat immediately returns. So does the ache in your arms. You find the broken spit. It's in the corner, bent and scorched, probably overloaded. You straighten it with brute force, then reheat and hammer out the warped sections. Your shirt sticks to your ribs. Your thighs feel like boiled mutton. Outside, the bell in the square rings. You've lost track of time. Could be mid-afternoon. Could be next Thursday. The light coming through the cracks in the walls has turned gold. That means something, right? You hand the fixed spit to the boy when he returns. He smiles. "She said thank you," he offers, then bolts off before you can ask if she sent payment. Probably not. Maybe she'll bring goose bones later. You can boil them for broth. You collapse back on your stool and stare at your hands. They're red, not sunburnt, just burned enough to count. You flex your fingers. The joints creak like the church pews. You wonder briefly what it would be like to spend a whole day sitting in one of those, listening to sermons about humility, sin, and the occasional miracle. Actually, you do believe in miracles. You forge them sometimes. There's the time you reforged a snapped blade with such clean symmetry it looked new. The time you mended a shattered door hinge and it held through a storm that tore half the roof off. And the time you made a dozen identical nails. Identical. Which no one noticed, of course. But you knew. You glanced toward the door. Still hot outside, but the worst of it seems to be fading. The air feels less like soup. You let out a long breath and stand again. Your legs protest, your knees crack, but you don't fall over. That's a victory. You grab a scrap piece of iron and start shaping a new hook, just for yourself this time. For your bench, to hold the hammer you always misplace. Because even in a heat wave, even when you're melting, even when the air is a punishment, you can't help but make something. It's what you do. You don't particularly like dealing with nights. They arrive covered in road dust and dried arrogance, clanking into your forge like armored thunderstorms. Their horses stamp and snort outside while they rattle off demands in that clipped, noble tone that somehow manages to insult you without using any actual insults. Today, it's Sir Aldebrand. You hear him before you see him. Metal boots thudding on the path, his spurs jangling, the distinct clang of someone who insists on wearing full armor to a shoe repair. He doesn't knock. "Blacksmith," he announces, stepping inside with all the grace of a falling cauldron. "My pauldron is jammed. I need it fixed before I ride to Riven March, by this afternoon." You wipe your hands on your apron and resist the urge to say, "Ah, of course, my liege. I'll cancel my peasant obligations for the day." Instead, you gesture for him to sit, which he does, on your tool chest, of course. You sigh. The man's made entirely of bad decisions and polished steel. The pauldron is indeed jammed, the hinge rusted, and the rivets pulled loose. You examine it, while Sir Aldebrand describes in great detail how he took a hard hit during a duel with Sir Grimoald, and didn't flinch, of course. You nod, biting back the reminder that most duels are more about posture than pain. Repairing knightly armor is a whole category of blacksmithing misery. The pieces are complex, heavy, and usually so custom-fitted that one wrong bend turns it into a tin corset. You've done this before. Reshaped helmets, repinned breastplates, replaced greaves that somehow got kicked by a mule. And yet, no matter how good the repair, they never seem impressed. You begin by heating a rivet pin. The hinge must be removed, cleaned, and reforged. It's tricky work, and you need the apprentice to hold the piece steady while you hammer. Of course, he's off delivering nails to the mill, naturally. So you clamp it awkwardly in your vise and work slowly, humming a little under your breath. Not a song, just noise to stay focused. Historians still debate whether medieval blacksmiths were also armorers, or if that was a more elite specialty. In big cities, sure, dedicated armorers had workshops the size of barns and apprentices stacked like firewood. But out here, you do what needs doing. Horseshoes 1 hour, holy relic mounts the next, then someone's overly dramatic shoulder plate. As you pry the pieces apart, you notice the hinge is bent, not from impact. This was a design flaw. You mutter something about rich men and their fragile toys. Sir Aldebrand, to his credit, sits in silence for once, probably because you're holding part of his expensive armor in tongs like it's a misbehaving fish. You file the edge, reforge the rivet, and gently reattach it. The hinge creaks, then settles. You give it a few test swings. Smooth. Perfect. You hand it back, but not before giving it one last polish. Always polish knight stuff. They care more about shine than structure. Sir Aldebrand inspects it, gives a curt nod, and flips you a coin. You catch it reflexively, note the lightweight, and realize it's half of what this job should cost. You open your mouth to protest. He's already outside, mounting his horse, which promptly leaves a steaming gift by your door. You stare at the coin. You stare at the horse. You whisper a quiet prayer to the god of manure for swift cosmic justice. Still, you pocket the coin. You'll trade it at the tavern for a loaf of bread and maybe, if the stars align, a cup of something warm that doesn't taste like metal. You clean up the armor scraps, rake the fire, and sit back for a moment. Nights are difficult, but their gear is a strange joy to fix. Armor has stories, dents from battle, scratches from branches, burn marks where some fool stood too close to a brazier. You've seen it all. You remember one time, a different knight, Sir Thorn, much kinder, if more prone to poetic rambling, brought in a shield with a literal bite mark on it. "There," he'd said, like that was normal. "You'd repaired it, yes, but you also carved a tiny bear on the inside lip of the shield. Just for fun. He never noticed. You glance at the anvil. It's scarred from years of armor repairs, blade smithing experiments, and one unfortunate incident involving a flaming curtain. But it's still sturdy, like you. Your apprentice returns, breathless, arms full of carrots someone used to pay for a previous job. You nod, take one, and chomp it without a word. "Was that a knight?" he asks, pointing at the receding figure on horseback. You nod again. "He left a tip," you say dryly, holding up the half-weight coin. And something else on the doorstep. He peers outside. "Oh," he says, wrinkling his nose. "Nights are the worst." You smile. "Not all of them, just most." Back to work. You've got nails to shape and a rake head that's split along the spine. You dunk the last bit of armor in water just for the hiss. It's satisfying, like a tiny dragon exhaling its final breath. The shop smells like iron and triumph. You roll your shoulders. The pain's still there, but manageable. You survived another night, another story, another scar. And tomorrow, if rumor's true, a noblewoman wants a custom door knocker shaped like a lion. That'll be fun, unless she brings a horse. You've forged hundreds of horseshoes in your life, thousands maybe, but none have sparked as much philosophical pondering as the humble great horseshoe debate. It starts, as always, with someone leaning against your doorframe, arms crossed, head tilted thoughtfully. This time, it's old Mattis, the beekeeper, who smells faintly of wax and misplaced confidence. "You know," he says, scratching his beard with a twig, "some folks say horses don't need shoes at all." You pause mid-hammer swing, holding a cherry-red bar of iron with your tongs. You stare at him. "They say it's unnatural," he continues. "Wild horses do just fine." You slowly place the iron back into the fire and turn to face him, one eyebrow arched with the weight of centuries. "Mathis," you say, "do wild horses haul sacks of barley across cobbled roads for 10 hours a day?" He shrugs. "Still, might be a scam. You lot charging us for nails and iron every few months." You grin. There it is, the local economy's favorite conspiracy theory, that blacksmiths invented horseshoes to stay employed. Historians still argue in fairness about when horseshoes became widespread. Some say the Romans used leather hoof coverings. Others trace nailed shoes back to the Celts. Still others point out that in warmer, softer climate regions, horses often went barefoot. But here, in your muddy, rock-strewn, freeze-thawed part of the world, bare hooves last about as long as a gossip-free morning. You return to your work, letting the metal glow brighter before taking it out. The fire flares as you pump the bellows, and sparks leap up like fireflies having an identity crisis. You hammer the shoe into shape with practiced ease, even as Mathis continues his musings in the background. "The monks say nails weaken the hoof," he says. "One told me it's like stabbing your own foot." You nod sagely. "When monks start pulling carts, I'll give their feet more thought." Your apprentice stifles a laugh in the corner. He's filing a pile of new bridle hooks and very clearly pretending not to listen. You dunk the shaped shoe into water. Hiss, plume of steam, the whole forge momentarily wrapped in a ghostly breath. And then test the curve on your wooden hoof form. Perfect fit. You line it up with the 3 others you made this morning. "Anyway," Mathis continues, undeterred, "I'm thinking of letting my mule go barefoot this season. Save some coin." You stop and turn. "You do remember what happened last year?" He pauses. Which part? When your mule threw a shoe on market day, refused to move, sat down in the middle of the road, and it took 6 people and a bucket of apples to convince him to stand up again? He scratches his chin thoughtfully. Huh, hadn't thought of that. You nod once firmly and return to your hammering. The great horseshoe debate always returns. It's eternal, like bell-ringing arguments, or whether the baker waters down his dough, you don't mind. It breaks the monotony. Even if it does make you wish for a pamphlet titled, Why Your Animal Needs Shoes, a very pointed guide. Still, the conversation sticks in your mind as you work. The science, or rather the art, of horseshoeing is rarely appreciated. Every hoof is different, flat-footed, high-arched, cracked, overgrown. You've seen them all. You've scraped out rot, filed away splits, and forged custom shoes that curve like the crescent moon. You've also had customers complain that the iron you used was too loud. You once made a pair of ceremonial shoes for a war horse, cloaked in velvet no less. The knight requested that the shoes shine like silver but be made of common iron, and refused to pay extra for the polishing. You ended up rubbing them with ash and oil until your arms hurt. He said they looked acceptable. Some days you consider leaving the forge and becoming a shepherd or a beekeeper. Then you remember that sheep are unpredictable and bees sting your nose. So you stay. You wipe your brow and sip some water. Warm again, with the faint taste of iron filings. You wonder absently if blacksmiths in warmer countries ever get cold drinks. Probably not. Everyone sweats the same. The apprentice brings you a new bar to cut into blanks. You nod and show him how to eyeball the length. Horseshoes aren't measured with rulers, but with instinct and hoof time. You'll know it's wrong if the horse throws you, you tell him. He looks nervous. Good. Healthy fear builds better smiths. You hammer until your wrist starts to tingle. That's the signal to stop before it turns into something worse. You pause, stretch your hand, and flex your fingers. 3 still work normally. The 4th cracks audibly. The 5th, a team player, if not a star athlete. You chuckle to yourself. Mathis is long gone. Off to theorize about barefoot mules with someone else, no doubt. You stack the finished shoes and wrap them in cloth. You'll deliver them to the stable tomorrow, assuming the stable boy doesn't forget to show up again. Last time, he claimed the chickens distracted him. You didn't press further. You sit down on your stool and glance around the forge. Smoke curling lazily. Tools in their places. Coals still glowing. Outside, the sky is beginning to tint orange. Another handful of horseshoes made. Another handful of arguments preemptively won. You're not here to win debates. You're here to keep the village moving one nail at a time. And besides, you know the truth. Barefoot mules do sit down in the road. You wake up stiff again, but this time it's different. Not just soreness, the usual dull drumbeat behind your joints. No, today your hands feel heavy, like someone swapped your fingers out for metal rods. You flex them. Slow, achy. One knuckle doesn't want to play along. Probably the same one that took a hammer to the side of a nail yesterday. You rise carefully, easing yourself down the ladder, step by reluctant step. It's chilly this morning, the air damp, creeping into your bones like an unwelcome guest. The kind of weather that makes your joints throb before your feet even touch the ground. Your knees pop, your back protests. You wonder, not for the first time, how much longer your body can do this. You build the fire, wincing a little as you haul the coal bucket. You try not to think about it. Just breathe, stoke, pump the bellows, and let the fire do what it always does. Pretend you're still 30, or 40, or even 50 if you're being generous. Truth is, you're not sure how old you are. You stopped counting a few years ago. The village priest once joked that you're like the anvil, always there, always the same shape, always a little louder than necessary. You're flattered and slightly insulted. Today's work is light, mercifully. Just a few nails, a horseshoe touch-up, and some rivets for the cooper's new barrels. The heavy orders were picked up yesterday. You pace yourself. Not because you want to, but because you have to. You hammer slowly. The tongs feel clumsy in your grip. The handle is too thick, or maybe your hand is swollen. You keep dropping things. It's maddening. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths commonly suffered from lead poisoning, especially those working with solder or refining ores. There are mentions of tremors, early onset stiffness, even sudden rages. But here, you're more worried about the simpler truth. Your body's just wearing out. You take a break before noon, sitting on your stool with your hands in your lap, fingers curled loosely. The pain is sharper now, like needles beneath the skin. You flex, wince, breathe. The apprentice arrives late again, this time with a chunk of bread and no explanation. He sees your hands, says nothing, but gets to work without complaint. He knows the rhythm now. He's learning. You wonder if he sees your hands and wonders, is that what's coming for me? You hope not. You hope he'll find a better way, or at least a gentler one. You get back to it, switching to your lighter hammer, the one with the smooth, worn handle. It used to be too small. Now, it's just right. Funny how tools adjust with you, or maybe you adjust to them. Your vision blurs a bit with each spark from the anvil. Your eyes aren't what they used to be either. You've got a scar across your left eyebrow that makes blinking feel like dragging a quill through wax. You squint through it. The piece you're working on is delicate, a metal latch for the scribe's cabinet. He insists it mustn't squeak, as if the forge doubles as a silent prayer house. You do your best, file it smooth, recheck the hinge, oil it gently with the greasy rag you keep in a jar for exactly this sort of petty miracle. Mid-afternoon, the pain in your wrist spikes. You drop the tongs. They clatter to the floor. You bend to pick them up and feel a jab of fire run down your spine. You stop halfway and just sit back on the floor. That's a new one. You laugh softly. It echoes in the forge. Your apprentice appears at the doorway, eyes wide. You all right? Just checking for dropped thoughts, you say. He doesn't get the joke. That's all right. You do. He helps you up awkwardly, his arm under yours. You feel small for a moment, lighter than you used to be, but not in a good way. You sit back on the stool and wrap your wrist in a strip of cloth. It doesn't help, but it gives your apprentice something to do. He watches you work the bellows with your left hand. You nod toward the tongs. You try it, you say. He does. Carefully, like it might explode, he fumbles the first grip, the second. Then he gets it. You guide his hands with your voice, showing him how to turn the piece, when to strike, where to stop. This is how you learned, through blisters and frustration and gentle corrections between blows. You feel the pain start to settle into background noise again. Not gone, just folded into you. The forge blazes. The tools are warm. The hammer swings, though not by your hand this time. You watch the apprentice work. You hear the familiar clang, slightly offbeat, but steady. You sit back. Your bones ache. Your hands throb. Your shoulders crack like logs in the fire. But for now, you rest. Let someone else shape the iron for a while. You once thought you'd spend your nights by a fire, reading scrolls, sipping something warm, maybe trading quiet jokes with your family while you rubbed soot off your elbows. That was the dream. Instead, you usually collapse into bed with one boot still on and the smell of burnt grease in your hair. Still, your family knows the forge just as intimately as you do, maybe more. Your wife, Aldreda, manages the house with the same efficiency you bring to ironwork. She doesn't lift hammers, but she's hammered out more disagreements between neighbors than you have rivets. She also maintains the ledgers, keeps track of who owes what, and has an uncanny ability to remember that Widow Maeve still hasn't paid for those fireplace hooks from midsummer. She doesn't nag. She just reminds you, often, with raised eyebrows and a tone that could curdle milk. Your two children, ages somewhere between helpful and hazardous, often skitter in and out of the forge like smoke spirits. They love the anvil. They love the sound, the glow, the danger of it. You don't. Not when they're near it, at least. "Get back!" you barked once, when your youngest reached for a red-hot scrap. Scared them to tears. Scared you worse. That night, you made a hook by the door, hung a scrap apron on it, and told them it was the forge guardian's cloak, not to be touched unless they were ready. Neither has touched it since. Magic wins where yelling fails. You try to leave the work behind when you step inside the house, but it follows you in. You sit down at the table, and your knees protest so loudly the dog gives you a worried glance. You wash your hands, sort of, in the basin, though your fingernails now appear permanently tinted like coal. Dinner is stew, always stew, with bread, and maybe a spoonful of something pickled if the market's been good. Tonight, it's lentils, carrots, and a bit of smoked meat that's probably rabbit. You don't ask. You just eat. Your wife watches you quietly, then gestures to your wrist. Still wrapped. Still swollen. "You should rest," she says gently. You give her the same shrug you've been giving everyone since you were 20. The shrug that says "I will," but never does. She doesn't push. She never does. That's the scariest part. You'd prefer the pushing. After dinner, you sit with your daughter while she shows you the doll she's made from scraps of cloth. She named it Anvella. You ask if Anvella is a princess. "No," she says. "She makes horseshoes." Your heart, somewhere inside your overworked rib cage, flutters just a little. Later, you lean against the hearth, your body creaking more than the floorboards, and listen as your son retells the story of the time your apron caught fire and you didn't notice until someone shouted. He reenacts it with exaggerated flailing. The whole family laughs. You laugh too, but you remember the burn on your thigh. It still aches in cold weather. Historians still argue about domestic life for tradesmen. Some records paint the blacksmith as a respected patriarch, others as gruff loners who kept their own company and died early. You're somewhere in the middle. You love your family. You also enjoy the quiet crackle of the fire when everyone else has gone to sleep, which they soon do. Your wife yawning, children curled like cats. The house is quiet. You step back outside, just for a moment. The forge is dark now, the coals buried, the tools sleeping where they lay. You take a deep breath. The night smells of ash, damp soil, and faint honeysuckle. Stars prick the sky. Your hands throb. Your knees ache. Your heart feels full. You return to the doorway and quietly shut the latch. You may be made of smoke and scars, but this is home. And inside, there's warmth that doesn't come from fire. You've never been much for politics. But the guild? The guild is different. You didn't join it so much as get absorbed by it, like a nail pulled into a magnet you never saw coming. At first, it sounded promising. Access to better iron, protection from rival smiths, a chance to raise your rates without getting pelted with onions. But what they didn't mention was the meetings, the petty disputes, the endless rules about what you can and can't do with a perfectly good pair of tongs. It started innocently enough. You made a new kind of latch, simpler, more reliable. You were proud of it. Sold 3 before the ink on your ledger dried. Then came the knock on your forge door. 2 guild officers, matching cloaks, matching frowns. Not within regulation, one said, squinting at the latch like it was cursed. No curved tongues on single-hinged mechanisms. Section 7. You blinked. Section what? He pulled out a parchment long enough to blanket a mule and pointed. Guild Standard. You spent the rest of the day reshaping the latches, and the rest of the week wondering if you'd accidentally joined a hammer cult. Historians still argue whether medieval guilds truly helped craftsmen or mostly just enforced hierarchy and control. They offered structure, yes, but also rules upon rules, enforced by men who hadn't touched a forge in years. It's hard to take seriously a regulation about coal usage when it's being delivered by someone with softer hands than your apprentice's pillow. And don't even get started on dues. Every quarter, you're expected to offer coin, goods, or sometimes a contribution of labor for the honor of the guild. Last year, that meant forging a ceremonial horseshoe for a statue of a saint who never saw a horse in his life. It gets better. There's the annual inspection. A master smith, usually someone named Reginald or Alaric with an impressive beard and suspiciously clean boots, wanders in and starts poking at your tools, nodding or grunting, depending on whether they match the guild-approved layout. Last time, he frowned at your anvil's position. Too close to the hearth, he muttered. You pointed out that moving it would require knocking down a wall and rebuilding half the forge. He nodded. Good. Keep standards high. You smiled. He didn't notice it was the kind of smile that happens just before someone invents passive-aggressive blacksmith poetry. Your apprentice, wide-eyed, asked if the guild was like a club. You told him yes, if clubs involved annual fees, arbitrary bench heights, and being told what kind of hammer grip was morally appropriate. But here's the thing. For all the nonsense, the guild does protect you. If a customer refuses to pay, you can file a complaint. If someone tries to set up a competing forge without approval, they'll get a sharp visit. And in times of famine or war, the guild ensures someone still brings you iron, even if it's warped and smells like someone dropped it in soup. You once saw them rally behind a smith who lost his tools in a fire. The next day, he had enough donated equipment to start again. They even gave him extra coal. You teared up watching it and blamed the smoke. So it's not all bad, just mostly infuriating. You finish a batch of curtain hooks, a new design you think skirts regulation, and carefully mark your ledger as standard model. That should keep the cloaks at bay. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear the chapel bell tolling across the village square. That means it's the third Thursday, Guild Day. You sigh. You toss your apprentice a warning look. If anyone with a wax seal asks about the rivets I sold to the cooper, you didn't see anything. He nods solemnly, like you've just knighted him into some secret order of ironmongers. You wipe your hands and close up shop early. The meeting will be held in the guild hall, a low timbered building with creaky benches and the stale smell of old parchment and old cheese. You'll sit through a speech about quotas. Someone will argue about the width of nail heads. Someone else will ask about the festival booth. There will be a lot of sighing. And tomorrow, you'll be back in the forge, slightly more regulated, slightly more tired, and no closer to understanding why one man thinks hinges should always face east. You shake your head, grab your cloak, and prepare for the ritual of bureaucracy. Because as much as the guild drives you mad, it's still part of the job. And around here, that means everything. There's something oddly ceremonial about forging for the church. It's not like working for the baker or the tanner. When the village priest arrives at your forge, robes fluttering like overcooked cabbage leaves, he doesn't come asking for nails or barrel hoops. No, he wants candle stands, reliquary locks, incense holders, maybe even a bell chain that sounds holier. And it always starts with the same phrase. The Lord has need of your craft, which is code for, you probably won't get paid, but consider your soul slightly more fireproof for the effort. Today's request? A wrought iron frame for a stained glass panel, supposedly imported from a far-off monastery. It depicts St. Dunstan, the priest says proudly. Patron of blacksmiths, of course. You don't remind him that St. Dunstan once, allegedly, pinched the devil's nose with blacksmith tongs. You also don't mention that Dunstan probably had apprentices who didn't disappear during the middle of a nail-counting task. Instead, you nod and sketch a few rough designs. The priest points to one. That's divine, he says, as if heaven itself just blessed your chalk drawing. You smile and get to work, hiding your irritation under a layer of saintly patience. Working on church commissions always feels like walking a tightrope. You're expected to be reverent, accurate, and precise, but also fast and unpaid. You forge a decorative leaf for the frame and shape its curls so delicately they could be mistaken for pastry. The priest watches closely. It mustn't look too worldly, he murmurs. You consider asking what that even means in the context of iron, but instead you nod and file a small cross into the end. He beams. Holy enough now. Historians still argue how involved medieval blacksmiths were in religious life. Some were devout, forging crosses and church bells with tears in their eyes. Others were more practical, showing up to Mass only when bribed with beer or threatened with social exile. You fall somewhere in between. You respect the church. You also know it has a curious habit of needing you more than paying you. There's a lingering superstition that blacksmiths have a foot in both worlds, the sacred and the strange. You're a metal shaper, a fire whisperer, a forger of things from the depths of the earth. Some villagers believe your skill borders on magic. A few call you Fire Brother. One, in a moment of excitement, asked if your hammer was blessed. You told her it was just heavy. Still, the air around the church work is different, quieter, more solemn. You find yourself choosing better iron, sanding the edges more carefully, making sure every curve is elegant. Not because of payment, because people will see this. In the chapel, during services, during births, weddings, and burials. There's pride in that, and maybe, just a little, a whisper of fear. You don't want your work to offend heaven, or the priest, or that one woman who sits in the front pew and judges everything with her eyebrows. By afternoon, you're fitting the final pieces together. The frame clicks into place like it was always meant to hold the glass. You polish the corners with a rag, then hold it up. Light passes through the frame and the colored pane behind it, casting red and blue patches on the forge wall. It's beautiful. You hate how proud you are of it. Your apprentice leans in. Did you mean to make the scroll work look like vines? You didn't, but now you say you did. He nods, impressed. The priest returns, just as you're wrapping it in cloth. He peers at the finished piece, then claps his hands gently. Truly blessed craftsmanship, he says. You'll be remembered for this. You smile, half bow, and wait for the coin. None comes. Instead, he gives you a small wooden token with a cross carved into it. For your tithe ledger, he says, a donation in kind. You thank him, place it beside the other 6 you've been given over the years, and mentally downgrade your dinner plans from possible stew to definitely bread. After he leaves, you sit for a moment and rub your temples. Your hands ache again, your back is stiff, and your soul is mildly purified, apparently. Then the clouds gather outside. You feel the shift in pressure before the first thunder rolls. Rain is coming. You move to the door, glance at the sky. Gray, heavy, ripe. You smile. Rain means fewer visitors tomorrow, fewer requests. Maybe even a half day of quiet tinkering. Inside, the frame glows faintly from the forge light. You look at it once more before placing it in the box. Maybe the priest was right. Maybe it was divine craftsmanship. Or maybe you're just getting very, very good. It's well past sundown now, and most of the village is curled into bed, wrapped in wool and silence. But you're still at the forge. This is the night forge, a different creature entirely. The world narrows to just you, the fire, and the breathing walls of your workshop. There's no chatter from the road, no apprentice asking what tempering means again, no customers yelling about crooked hinges. Just the hiss of embers and the gentle tink-tink of metal being coaxed into submission. You're not even working on a commission. Tonight, you're forging for yourself. A hook, maybe, or a pendant for your daughter, or just some odd-shaped tool you've been meaning to try. Half punch, half prying bar, possibly useless, definitely interesting. Whatever it is, it's yours. The forge at night feels quieter, yes, but not silent. There's a rhythm to it. The coals crackle in their bed. The bellows wheeze and sigh like an old man dreaming. Your anvil rings sharper in the still air. Each strike bounces back at you like a whisper. Even your own footsteps feel amplified. Each scuff and shift against the soot-dusted floor, echoing softly. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths worked at night regularly or only in times of urgency. Some records suggest that forging after dark was discouraged, linked to strange superstitions. The fire at night was believed by some to attract spirits. Others whispered that blacksmiths could speak to the fire and that their forges glowed with unnatural life once the sun went down. You don't believe that? Well, not officially, but sometimes, when the flames flicker just right, You swear they move with purpose. When you strike the iron at the exact right moment, it sings back. Not a note, but a feeling. The hammer hits, and for a breath, you know the shape the metal wants to be. You don't tell anyone this, of course. They'd start asking if the fumes finally got to you. Maybe they have. You work slower now, letting the fire guide you. You hold the glowing iron in your tongs, twist it gently, and it begins to curl like a leaf unfurling. Not part of any order, not requested, just because. You smile. There's a calmness here, a kind of strange peace. The forge by day is full of noise and purpose and aching limbs, but the forge by night is yours alone. You can make mistakes, you can experiment, you can even fail, and no one will come knocking to ask why their plow's still crooked. You reach for the punch you made last winter, still rough, barely functional, and test it on the iron. It leaves a mark, like a sunburst. You didn't expect that. You like it. You punch another. A pattern is forming, and you follow it without thinking. Outside, the night settles heavier. The wind picks up, rattling the forge shutters. The trees creak. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and is silent again. Inside, the fire continues. It feels like it's waiting for something. You speak aloud just to hear your voice again. You talk to the iron. You talk to the coals. You tell them about the apprentice's terrible handwriting and how your knee locked up during the guild meeting and how the priest's token of appreciation is now a doorstop. The fire crackles. You pretend it's laughing with you. Some in the village still believe that blacksmiths are touched by the divine, by the uncanny, by something not entirely human. You work with earth and flame and air. You bend metal, shape tools that become extensions of people's lives. There's power in that. Strange, quiet power. You don't think of yourself as magical, but sometimes when you quench the iron just right and the hiss fills the room like a dragon's exhale, you feel different, like the forge sees you. Tonight, you finish shaping the hook. It's small, nothing fancy, but balanced, elegant. It will hang your ladle perfectly. You quench it. Steam rises, curling around your arms like pale ribbons. You breathe it in and cough slightly. Probably not good for your lungs, but then, what is? You place the hook on the bench and sit. The forge is glowing softly. The fire doesn't need tending. The bellows are still. You listen. And in the hush, in the glowing coals and cooling iron, you almost think you hear it. Good work, the fire seems to say. You nod, not smiling now. Because you believe it. You never expect much from market day. You rise earlier than usual because packing your cart always takes longer than it should. You load the usual wares, horseshoes bundled in cloth, a box of nails, a dozen hinges, some iron cooking hooks, and one experimental trivet that nobody asked for, but you're weirdly proud of. You stack them carefully, tying them with fray and rope that you've meant to replace for 3 seasons. The cart creaks under the weight, but it holds for now. You rub your shoulder, already stiff, and mutter, "Don't start, not today." The road into town is bumpy, uneven, and full of surprises. You've patched this cart more than you've patched your roof. The wheels rattle like your knees on a cold morning. You walk beside it, hand on the shaft. Every step another jolt through your boots. By the time you arrive at the market square, your back is aching, your hands are raw from the rope, and you're sweating through your tunic. You breathe in the air, equal parts hay, sweat, pastry, and possibility. Then you find your usual spot, or rather, you try to. Someone's taken it, A traveling knife vendor from another village has set up there, complete with banners and a smug grin. You don't argue. You just find a new spot between the fishmonger and the woman who sells pickled turnips in decorative jars. The smell is challenging. You unload slowly, arranging your wares with care. You hang the hinges on a wooden frame, lay out the nails in tidy rows, stack the horseshoes in a fan shape that's supposed to suggest luck. Then you wait and wait. An hour passes. A few people stop by, pick things up, nod approvingly, and move on. One man inspects every single nail and then declares, "They're a bit bendy, aren't they?" before wandering off without buying anything. You briefly consider launching a hinge at the back of his head. Your apprentice arrives, late and chewing on something. He swallows and says, "Want me to shout about the hooks?" You nod. He does, loudly. It works about as well as whispering into a thunderstorm. Eventually, someone buys a pair of hinges. Then a farmer needs new cleats for his plow. Then a boy buys a single nail for a project, he says proudly. You give him two because he reminds you of yourself. But business is slow. You wander a bit, just to stretch your legs. The wool merchant is arguing with the cheese seller. A juggler drops 3 turnips in a row. A pig escapes a pen and gallops triumphantly down the cobbled street before someone tackles it into a barrel. You return to your cart just in time to see a dog lifting its leg on your nail box. You sigh. Historians still argue how essential blacksmiths were to local markets. Some say they were a cornerstone, needed, respected, busy. Others say that by the later Middle Ages, blacksmithing had become so commonplace that markets were saturated. Too many smiths, too few customers willing to pay full price. Either way, today's market proves one thing. Selling metal is less about skill and more about timing. Then the rain starts. Not heavy, just a drizzle, but persistent. You scramble to cover your wares with oiled cloth. The horseshoes you left out begin to glisten, which you try to convince yourself looks intentional. It does not. Customers disappear under awnings. Your apprentice is gone, probably following the pie smell. A woman stops briefly, points at your trivet and asks, "Is this a hat stand?" You pause. It can be. She buys it. Your single best sale of the day is to someone who has no idea what they bought. You pack up as the market thins. Everything's damp. You're hungry, tired, and about one hinge away from swearing off commerce altogether. Then, just as you're tying down the last bundle, someone taps your shoulder. It's the old miller. He holds out a box of scones. "For the tools last month," he says. "Never did thank you proper." You take them, surprised. He nods once and disappears into the misting rain. You stand there for a moment, holding a box of slightly squashed baked goods, watching the last few carts roll away. Your apprentice reappears holding a meat pie and covered in gravy. "Did we sell the hat thing?" he asks. You nod. He beams. "Told you it was a good idea." You shake your head and climb onto the cart bench. The wheels groan, the rope creaks, and your knees pop like kernels. You click your tongue. The cart lurches forward. The road home is quieter, wetter, but somehow lighter. You didn't sell much. You lost your usual spot. A dog peed on your inventory. But you made a boy smile, convinced someone to buy abstract sculpture, and got a box of gratitude in the form of mediocre pastries. Not bad for a bad day. The sun is low when you return to the village. More of a red smear behind the trees than a proper ball of fire now. Your cart creaks under what didn't sell. The horseshoes jangle. The hinges thump against one another with a rhythm that might be a song if you weren't too tired to care. You pull up beside the forge, which looks exactly as you left it. No one's broken in. No one's left a note. No mysterious knights demanding repairs on their enchanted gauntlets. Just the usual comfort: soot, smoke, silence. You unload slowly, muscle memory guiding your steps even as your arms complain. Every iron piece you stack back on the shelf feels like both a burden and a badge. Unsold, maybe, but solid, well-made, honest. You settle onto your stool. Your bones do their now customary chorus of clicks and creaks. You're too sore to feel anything but gratitude for still being vertical. The apprentice walks in a few minutes later, smelling like meat pie and rain. "I fed the dog that follows us," he says. "Use the crust I didn't want?" You nod. He's probably the most loyal customer we have. He chuckles and begins sweeping the forge, badly but with heart. You sit and watch. The fire's out for the night, the bellows still. Everything is still warm, though. The kind of lingering warmth that reminds you this place works because you do. And it hits you again, how essential this mess is. You don't just fix things. You hold the village together. Quietly, under layers of soot and sweat, you're the hinge that doesn't squeak, the clasp that doesn't snap, the wheel that doesn't wobble. You remember when the thatcher came to you with his broken ladder rung, or the baker needing a metal paddle extension when his old one splintered mid-loaf, or the midwife who once needed you to forge a birthing hook. You didn't ask questions. You just made it. Historians may debate your status, your influence, but the truth is simpler. Without you, doors don't open. Carts don't roll, food doesn't cook, shoes don't fit. And if the forge ever went cold for good, the village would feel it within a week, probably sooner. That's the funny part. No one really notices a blacksmith when things work. But the moment something breaks, suddenly you're everyone's best friend. You never get used to it, not really, but you learn to accept it, even appreciate it. The apprentice trips over the slack tub and mutters a word that's not quite a curse. You glance at him, amused. He grins sheepishly. "I think I'm getting better," he says, with no small amount of pride. You nod. "You're less of a hazard than last week." He beams. You stretch, wincing. Your wrists ache. Your back is a full opera of complaints, and your fingers are so stiff you're not sure they'll ever uncurl. But your heart, it's lighter. Because, even if no one says it, even if your name's not carved into a fancy building or sung in drunken ballads, you matter. Not in a loud, flashy way, but in the dependable, utterly essential way. Your tools are an extension of you. Each hammer strike is a quiet signature, every twist of iron a promise kept. You've built the hidden skeleton of your world, one bracket, one nail, one plowshare at a time. And sure, it's a hard life, a grimy, thankless, punishing life, but it's yours. And when the wind howls through the village, and the shutters creak, and the hearths glow orange, you can sit in your forge, surrounded by the sparks and shadows of your own making, and know they couldn't do this without you. It begins with a cough. You're standing at the anvil, hammer raised, halfway through shaping a hinge pin, when it comes, dry and sharp, like your chest forgot how to breathe smoothly. You set the hammer down and try again, Another cough, this one deeper, the kind that rattles. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and see a tiny smear of something you pretend is soot. But you know better. You've known for a while. You sit down slowly, bones stiff, hands curling by habit rather than function. Your grip isn't what it used to be. Lately, you've had trouble even holding your smallest hammer for more than a few swings. You're not dying, at least not all at once, but something inside you is winding down, not broken, just used. You look around the forge. Everything here has aged with you. The walls are darker than they used to be. The bellows sag more. Even the anvil is rounded in places it once wasn't. And the tools, well, they've learned to match your rhythm. You reach for a rag and wipe down the tongs, slowly, carefully, each motion deliberate, almost reverent. Your apprentice comes in, cheerful, carrying a bucket of water and a half-eaten pear. He chatters about something, a lost goat, maybe a festival. You only catch every other word, but you nod along. He sees your face and quiets. Bad day? You shrug. Getting old, you say, not unkindly. He frowns. You still make better nails than I do. You smile. That's muscle memory and spite. He laughs, then grows serious. Are you gonna stop? You don't answer right away, because you don't know. Stopping sounds impossible. This forge is more than your workshop. It's your world. You've spent decades here, buried moments in the ashes, shaped memories into metal, left pieces of yourself in every hinge and hook and horseshoe. But you also know that you can't swing forever. Your apprentice sets the bucket down and picks up your tongs. He holds them awkwardly, like they might break. You could teach more, he says. Just talk. Watch me. Tell me when I'm doing it wrong. You consider it. Sitting, not swinging. Teaching instead of shaping. Letting someone else stoke the fire. The idea feels both foreign and inevitable. Historians rarely write about how blacksmiths stop. There's no ceremony, no grand farewell. Just a gradual fading from maker to mentor, from forger to storyteller. A quiet passing of the hammer, often before anyone notices it's happened. You nod. Maybe I will. That night, you stay at the forge longer than usual. Not working, just remembering. You run your hand along the grain of your oldest hammer, the one with the worn-down handle and the tiny nick where it fell into the quench bucket during a thunderstorm. You turn your gaze to the ceiling, to the beam where you carved your name when you finished your first solo project. It's still there, faint, but there. You sit by the hearth as the last embers glow, fading from orange to red to a dull gray. The apprentice has gone home. The tools are quiet. The night is still. You lean back against the warm stone and close your eyes. And for a long, long while, you listen to the echo of hammer strikes past, to the fire's slow breath, to the soft shift of coals as they settle in for their own kind of sleep. And you think, if this is the end of your forging days, it's not a bad one. It's just another cooling piece of iron, no longer red hot, but still strong. And now, the forge is quiet. The tools are resting where they belong, still warm from your hands. The coals in the hearth have settled into their final hush, their last flickers painting the walls with sleepy shadows. Outside, the village is deep in its own slumber. Windows dark, shutters drawn, the night wrapped gently around each rooftop like a soft wool blanket. You sit back against the stones, your body finally still. No hammer to raise, no iron to shape. Just the gentle ache of a day well spent and the peace that follows honest work. The air smells of smoke and steel and something older, something like memory. The echoes of every piece you ever made linger in the rafters. Hinges, nails, horseshoes, hooks, each one a story, each one a quiet miracle. There's no crowd here, no applause, just the fire's long exhale and the rhythm of your breath keeping pace with it. You've done enough for now, more than enough. So let your hands rest, let your shoulders ease. Let the last sparks fade into the comfort of night. You've held your place in history, not loudly, not grandly, but with steady hands and a stubborn heart. And now it's time to sleep. Let the forge dream for you. Let the fire rest and drift gently into darkness.